The jungle was eerily silent, the kind of silence that made the air feel heavy. The tall trees swayed gently under the cold night breeze, their twisted branches casting long, ghostly shadows on the forest floor. The thick scent of damp earth filled the air, mingling with the faint rustle of unseen creatures hiding in the darkness. Then came the sound of footsteps, small, uneven, and filled with desperation. A young boy, no older than 10, stumbled through the dense undergrowth. His clothes were torn, his face streaked with dirt and dried tears. His bare feet ached from walking for hours, but fear kept him moving. He had been lost in the jungle since sunset, and now under the eerie glow of the moon he was completely alone, or so he thought. A deep growl rumbled through the trees. The boy froze mid-step, his heart hammering against his ribs. His breath came, out in short, shaky bursts. Slowly he turned his head. That's when he saw them. 3 massive shadows emerged from the darkness, their golden eyes glowing like fire in the night. The boy's throat tightened as his vision cleared. Lions. 3 full-grown lions stood before him, muscular, powerful, and terrifyingly silent. The largest one, a male with a thick golden mane, locked eyes with him. His breath was slow and steady, his body tense but unmoving. The other 2 lions, slightly smaller but just as fierce, flanked him on either side. The boy couldn't breathe. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to run, but he knew better. Running would be the worst thing he could do. He had heard stories of wild animals chasing down anything that fled. He stood frozen, his pulse pounding in his ears. The lead lion took a step forward. The boy flinched. His legs trembled, but he stayed rooted in place. The lion took another step, its massive paws barely making a sound against the jungle floor. The other 2 followed closely, their tails flicking in the moonlight. The boy's lips parted, but no sound came out. His mind raced through every terrifying possibility. Were they going to attack? Were they playing with him like a predator toying with its prey before the final strike? Then something completely unexpected happened. The lead lion stopped. He didn't snarl. He didn't charge. He simply sat down, his golden eyes never leaving the boy's face. The other 2 followed, lowering their massive bodies to the ground. The boy blinked, his breath hitching. What was happening? Lions weren't supposed to act like this. They were supposed to hunt, to chase, to kill. But these lions, they were just watching him. A shiver ran down his spine. Why weren't they attacking? And if they weren't here? To harm him? Then what did they want? Whatever was about to happen next would shock everyone. The boy stood still, his breath shallow, his mind spinning with questions. The 3 lions remained where they were, watching him with an eerie calmness. That didn't match their wild nature. The leader, the massive golden-maned lion, slowly rose to his feet and took a step back. The other 2 followed. Then, as if coming to a silent agreement, they turned away and began walking into the darkness of the jungle. The boy hesitated. Were they leaving, or were they leading him somewhere? His heart pounded in his chest as he considered his options. He had no idea where he was. The jungle was dangerous at night, filled with unseen threats lurking in the shadows. If he stayed here, he could become prey to any number of creatures, snakes, wild dogs, or worse. But following the lions, that was even more insane, and yet something deep inside him told him to trust them. Summoning his courage, he took a slow step forward. Then another. The lions didn't react. The boy swallowed hard and continued moving. He kept a safe distance, but every step took him deeper into the unknown. The moonlight barely reached through the thick canopy, casting eerie shadows that shifted with every breeze. Strange sounds echoed around him. Distant growls, the rustling of unseen creatures, the whisper of leaves in the wind. Still, the lions moved with a clear purpose. After what felt like hours, the jungle began to change. The thick trees parted slightly, revealing a clearing bathed in silver light. In the center of the clearing stood an old fallen tree trunk, its bark worn and scratched. The lions stopped. The lead lion turned his head slightly, as if gesturing for the boy to approach. The boy hesitated, his legs trembling from exhaustion and fear. What was this place? Why had they brought him here? Slowly, he stepped forward. His eyes scanned the tree trunk, noticing deep claw marks etched into the wood. But among the scratches, something else caught his eye. Something small and metallic wedged into a crevice of the bark. A locket. His fingers trembled as he reached for it. The metal was cold, rusted with age, but still intact. He pried it open, his breath catching in his throat. Inside was a tiny, faded photograph, a man and a woman smiling warmly. Hand in the woman's arms, a baby. His heart stopped. That baby was him. Confusion flooded his mind. How was this possible? How had this locket ended up here, in the middle of the jungle? And why had the lions brought him to it? His hands shook. As he traced the worn edges of the photo, that's when he heard it. A deep guttural growl from the trees behind him. The lions instantly tensed, their ears flicking toward the sound. The boy's pulse spiked as he turned his head, his breath catching in his throat. Something was out there. The undergrowth shuddered, and a pair of glowing red eyes pierced through the darkness. A low snarl rippled through the air, sending a chill. Down the boy's spine, the lions positioned themselves between him and the unseen predator. Their tails flicked aggressively, their muscles coiled like springs ready to pounce. Then, with a sudden burst of movement, it emerged, a monstrous hyena, twice the size of any the boy had ever seen, stepped into the clearing. Its fur was matted, its jaw twisted into a snarl that revealed sharp, blood-stained teeth. The boy's stomach dropped. This wasn't just any hyena. This was a killer. Here's the climactic revelation, up to 2,000 words. Following your story's template, the monstrous hyena took another step forward, its red eyes gleaming with hunger. Its lips curled, revealing long, jagged teeth stained from past kills. A low, eerie chuckle escaped its throat, a sound that sent chills down the boy's spine. The three lions remained still but alert. Their ears were pressed back, their tails flicking with tension. The air grew heavy with an unspoken challenge, a silent battle of wills between predator and kings. The boy didn't dare move. His fingers clenched tightly around the locket, his mind racing. Why was this happening? What did this all mean? The hyena let out a sudden ear-splitting cackle and lunged. The lead lion met it mid-air. A thunderous clash erupted as the two beasts collided. Claws raked, jaws snapped, and furious growls filled the night. The force of their battle shook the very ground. The two other lions sprang into action, circling the hyena with practiced precision. The boy stumbled back, his heart pounding like a war drum. The fight was brutal. The hyena, though alone, fought like a demon, twisting and snapping with terrifying speed. It wasn't just trying to defend itself, it was hunting. The leader lion, massive and golden-maned, took a powerful swipe at the hyena's face. Blood sprayed into the air and the beast let out an agonized screech, but it didn't retreat. Instead, it attacked with even more fury. And then, the hyena's eyes shifted. For a brief moment, it ignored the lions and locked onto something else. The boy. A cold wave of terror crashed over him. The hyena wasn't just fighting for survival. It was after him. His instincts screamed at him to run, but his legs refused to move. He was trapped, frozen, as the monstrous beast suddenly broke free from the lions and charged toward him. The boy barely had time to react. Then, a blur of golden fur. The lead lion lunged, intercepting the attack just inches from the boy. The ha! Impact was so powerful that both creatures tumbled across the ground, snarling and clawing at each other with deadly precision. The boy scrambled backward, gasping for breath. His body shook with terror, but his mind was drowning in something else. Questions. Why had the lions protected him? Why had they led him to the locket, and why did the hyena want him dead? Then, like a flash of lightning, a memory surfaced. A voice, a story told long ago. The jungle remembers, child. It never forgets the past. His grandfather's words. And suddenly everything clicked. This wasn't just a fight. This was a battle that had started long before he was even born. The forgotten past. The boy's breath came in sharp gasps as the truth pieced itself together in his mind. His family had a history here. His parents. They had been here once, not just as travelers but as survivors. The locket, the old tree trunk with claw marks, it wasn't random. It was a message. A story carved into the very fabric of the jungle. His mother and father had faced this same beast years ago, and they had barely escaped. But something was different this time. This time the lions had chosen to fight. His parents must have encountered these very same lions once before. And in that moment, whether by fate or some unspoken understanding, a bond had been formed. And now, that bond was being repaid. The boy clutched the locket tighter, his chest heaving. He wasn't just some lost child. He was part of something much bigger. A cycle of survival, of alliances forged in blood and time, and tonight that cycle was about to end, the final battle. The battle raged on, but the lions were relentless. They fought not just for survival, but for vengeance. The golden-maned leader launched himself at the hyena, his claws sinking deep into its flesh. The beast howled in pain but refused to go down. It twisted, snapping its powerful jaws at the lion's throat. The boy's heart stopped. The hyena was too fast. It lunged, and then a second lion slammed into its side. A deafening roar filled the air as the two younger lions joined the fight with full force. Their claws tore through fur and flesh, their roars shaking the very trees. The hyena let out a strangled cry. It staggered back. Blood dripped from its wounds. Its breath came in ragged gasps. It knew it was losing. The golden-maned lion took one final step forward. His deep, rumbling growl echoed through the clearing like a war drum. His amber eyes locked onto the hyena with pure, burning fury. The jungle fell silent. Then, with one last mighty swipe, the lion struck. The hyena let out a final, piercing wail, and then collapsed, dead. The silence that followed was deafening. The boy couldn't move. His mind barely processed what had just happened. The monstrous creature that had haunted this jungle, the nightmare that had once threatened his family, was gone. The lions stood over the fallen beast, their breaths heavy but victorious. The golden-maned leader turned, his amber eyes meeting the boy's. And for the first time, the boy understood. This wasn't just protection. This was a promise kept, a debt repaid, a bond that had lasted beyond generations. The lions had watched over this jungle for years. They had seen the past, remembered, the faces that had once walked these lands. And tonight, they had made their final stand, not just for themselves, but for him, for his family, for the past that had never been forgotten. The boy felt tears sting his eyes. He wasn't afraid anymore. He wasn't lost. He belonged here. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, and as the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, the golden-maned lion gave one last look, then turned, leading his pride back into the heart of the jungle, leaving the boy with the truth and a story that would never be forgotten. The golden glow of dawn painted the jungle in hues of orange and pink. The night's battle had left its mark. Trampled grass clawed up earth, and the lifeless body of the monstrous hyena. But despite the chaos, the jungle was peaceful now. The boy stood in the clearing, his chest still rising and falling rapidly, his fingers clenched around the rusted locket. The lions had won. And yet, as he watched the golden-maned leader turn away, leading his pride back into the wilderness, a strange emptiness filled his heart. He wasn't just witnessing the end of a fight. He was witnessing the end of a legacy. His family's story in this jungle had come full circle. The jungle had tested him, just as it had once tested his parents. And just like them, he had survived. But now there was one final challenge left, finding his way home. The journey back. The golden-maned lion turned once, his amber eyes meeting the boy's for a final time. There was no need for words, only understanding. Then, with a graceful flick of his tail, he disappeared into the dense foliage, his companions following silently behind him. The boy took a shaky breath. He was alone again. For the first time since the night began, the jungle felt vast, unfamiliar. Without the lions beside him, every rustling leaf, every distant cry of a bird seemed louder, more daunting. But something inside him had changed. Fear was no longer in control. He had survived a battle with a beast that had once haunted his own bloodline. He had stood beside the kings of the jungle, witnessed their strength, their loyalty. If they believed he could survive, then he had no reason to doubt himself. Clutching the locket tightly, he took a step forward, then another and another. He didn't know exactly where he was, but he knew one thing: the jungle never forgot its own, and if it had brought him here, it would show him the way back. Memories in the earth as he walked. The jungle slowly began to change. The deep shadows of night gave way to dappled morning. Light. The thick, tangled undergrowth grew less daunting. Familiar landmarks emerged: twisted trees, a fallen log covered in moss, a small stream glistening in the sun. And then something stopped him in his tracks. A set of footprints. They were faint, nearly erased by time, but unmistakable. Human footprints. His breath caught. Could it be? With shaking hands, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the locket. He flipped it open, staring at the faded photograph of his parents. His mother and father had once stood in this jungle, and now their son stood in their place. Tears stung his eyes, but he didn't wipe them away. Instead, he let them fall, mixing with the earth beneath his feet. This jungle held stories: his story, his family's story. He wasn't lost anymore. He was home. The reunion hours passed. The sun rose higher in the sky, casting golden beams through the treetops. The boy pushed forward, fueled by something stronger than exhaustion: hope. And then, at last, he saw it. A break in the trees, the faintest trace of smoke curling into the sky. A distant voice calling his name. His breath hitched. His legs moved before he could think. He ran. Through the undergrowth, past the towering trees, his heart pounding with each step. His throat ached, his muscles burned, but he didn't stop. And then, "My son," a cry of pure relief. He barely had time to react before warm arms wrapped around him, pulling him into the tightest embrace he had ever known. His mother. Sobs racked her body as she held him close, her hands shaking as they ran over his hair. His face, his arms, making sure he was real, that he was safe. His father was there too, his strong arms wrapping around both of them. His usually composed face was crumpled with emotion. "You're safe," his father whispered, his voice thick, with unspoken fear, unspoken love. "You came back." The boy's hands tightened around the locket. "No." The jungle brought him back. The story lives on us. The boy sat beside the fire that night, wrapped in a warm blanket. He told them everything, about the lions, about the battle, about the locket. His mother's eyes filled with tears as she held the tiny rusted pendant in her hands. "I thought this was lost forever," she whispered. "This belonged to my father. He gave it to me when I was young, before we ever left this place." His father's gaze was distant, lost in thought. "I knew they were still here," he murmured. "The lions, they remember." The boy nodded. "They do." A silence stretched between them, not empty but full of understanding, full of unspoken gratitude. Then his mother reached forward, gently closing the locket in his hand. "Keep it," she said softly. "This is your story now." The boy looked down at the locket, feeling its weight in his palm. No, not just his story, the jungle's story. A story that would live on. And as the fire crackled beside him and the night stretched across the sky, he knew. This was just the beginning. If you enjoyed this thrilling journey through the jungle, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more captivating stories. What did you think about the boy's adventure with the lions? Do you believe animals can have a deeper connection with humans? Share your thoughts in the comments below. For more heart-touching and suspenseful tales, stay tuned and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. The jungle still holds many secrets, and this might just be the beginning.